Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Of course, part of the 90 Min football family. He is back. The main man, Mr. Mike Stavrou, returns after a long-term absence, long-term injury. And I thought that I had the most overgrown beard in the Arsenal podcast space at the moment, but it looks like you're rivaling me there, Mike. How you doing, mate?
This is short for me, mate. But you know what? Like, speaking about the beard thing, I know you mentioned it that you wish you cut it before you saw the King.
Yeah.
I was so jealous, man. Like, what was it like?
Um, I'll be lying if I said I stood there and had a conversation with him. I was like an 8-year-old schoolgirl. Hi Thierry, like I'm a big fan. But it was it was just when your voice goes all high pitched because you're nervous,
Yeah.
and then you go to take a picture and your hands shaking because you're nervous about it. But he looked trim enough to play. He looked like he could have started up front for the Arsenal, and it would have been absolutely fine. It was really surreal. Alan Shearer was in the room as well. Ali McCoist was there, who I've spoken to a bit because I've done a fair few bits on TalkSport with him. But
Yeah.
Roberto Martinez was there as well. And when I sort of came out of the room, having like spoken very, very briefly to Thierry Henry, got a picture with him, whatever, I kind of thought to myself, should I have asked Alan Shearer for a picture as well? And
Well,
Roberto Martinez, like, do you think
were
they were
they there when you did it?
they were
Were they
literally
there?
right there. Like, do you think they were sitting there going, "What about us, you absolute twat? Like, are we
Probably,
nobodies?"
yeah, probably.
But it's Thierry Henry, innit?
Yeah, it's Thierry Henry. It's Thierry Henry, man. Like he is. I've interviewed a few players, not as many as you, but um, just the chance to meet Thierry is on my bucket list.
Yeah,
It's got to happen at one point. I think him slightly above Righty, but those two are like my top two. I think and it's the same. Like if I met him, I'd just melt. Like I wouldn't know what to say.
yeah. But I get the impression that Righty would be just a little bit more. And I'm not saying Thierry Henry wasn't friendly or wasn't like welcoming or anything like that. He was, and the guy was working. Like he was in the room, he was
Yeah,
getting prepared to go and do a broadcast, whatever. I wasn't expecting him to stand there and conversate with me for an hour or whatever. But yeah, it was it was surreal. And
yeah,
obviously the night was topped off by Declan Rice's, of course, winning goal. I mean, just before we go into the Kai Havertz topic, which I really want to do in depth because we've been speaking about it throughout the day via WhatsApp, and I thought it would make a really, really great podcast topic. But what have you made of, or what did you make of what we saw unfold in front of us last night? Because I tried to do like a bit of an instant reaction pod. We put it out late last night, and I just couldn't gather my thoughts. Like I was jumbling my words up straight after the final whistle. I was just all over the place because emotionally, they took us on one hell of a ride.
yeah. It was a bit of a throwback to last season. I think we had a lot of those games where we had to expend so much energy and we put so much emotion into it because that's the way we kind of played at that time. We relied on blowing teams away, and this season has not been like that at all. And we'll come on to reviewing this season in more depth later on. But it was a complete far cry from what we've seen this season, which is why I think it was so mad. Giving the goals away, individual errors, but coming back and scoring straight away, but also playing some really nice stuff. I mean, the biggest shot for me, Harry, is that, and when I saw, look, I'll be honest, I've not watched a lot of Luton games this season, but I looked at them. They've still got 9 points from 14 games, something like that. I was expecting them to be rubbish, and I was expecting them to be like how easy it was to play against Sheffield United and Burnley. I know it's different because those two were at home, but I was expecting the quality of opposition to be like that. But to be fair to them, like they made it quite a tough game, and I know they scored, two set pieces and one goal that shouldn't have gone in, but they challenged us well. They were high energy. The crowd got behind them. They created a few chances here and there outside of those goals. So I was a little bit surprised by them and by us, really.
I think one of the things that I have to stress, and I did make this point on the instant reaction, was the quality of the atmosphere. It was just incredible. It's as good an atmosphere as you'll experience in the Premier League. And it's not a big ground, Kenilworth Road. It's a very small ground. It's a very intimate setting. The fans are basically on top of the pitch, and the Luton fans, they're a loud bunch. And you might even say, as an Arsenal fan, that they can be a bit of a horrible bunch in that they'll cheer every single challenge. They'll give every single one of your players stick and all the rest of it. You know, that's what they do. That's how they try and sort of level the playing field. And I thought they did a really good job of that, the supporters, in terms of making it a hostile and intimidating environment. I do think Luton crossed the line a little bit in the first half, in particular, with some of the challenges. I did think that they tried to be competitive, as you'd expect, combative, and all the rest of it. But I did feel like, and I don't know what you think, that the referee maybe just let a little bit too much go in that sense in the first period. And once he showed a few yellow cards towards the end of the first half, I thought he finally got a little bit more control of it.
Yeah, the left back in particular, and
Alfie Doughty, yeah.
We've come to expect this, that teams will target Saka, but the sort of strength that they were using in the tackles, when there's some balls that are 50-50 that you go into a bit strongly in games like this, because your manager's told you to be aggressive, and
Let them know you're there.
let them know you're there, all of that sort of stuff. Get in early, sort of rattle them, whatever it is the manager will say. But like Saka, a lot of the time when he receives the ball, has his back to the defender. So you're just going through him. You're not going to win the ball. And he did that way too many times, I think, before he did get a yellow card in the end, didn't he? I think
so.
Yeah. It was, the ref let way too much go. But I did praise Luton there. But I mean, come on, like their game plan was incredibly rudimentary. Like every time the ball went back to the defenders, it will go back to the keeper. The keeper would knock it long. They'd play for second balls. They'd play for set pieces. But it worked, which actually makes me quite upset and angry as an Arsenal fan, because the fact that we allowed them to score from those few opportunities that they made was frustrating. But I'm just saying credit to them, because just look at the disparity of finances. Look at look how much they've spent, even compared to the likes of Burnley. Like they really have got a really low budget compared to us. So we should be beating them. So that's why I give them credit. But yeah, I mean, some of the decisions, Gabriel as well. I mean,
yeah,
agreed.
Wow. It was like a bit of a throwback, wasn't it? It was like going to Stoke away like 8 to 10 years ago. That's what it felt like to me. The crowd were on our backs. Everybody was against us, all the rest of it. I know we conceded some soft goals based on the defensive standards that we've set this season, but I do think that at the very least we stood up to the physical battle, and we didn't allow ourselves to be bullied in the way that teams of previous years would have been in a situation and under circumstances like that. So I guess that's the positive. We'll come on to talk a little bit about the season so far. We'll talk a little bit about the celebration police. I know you've got quite a big bit that you want to say on that. We'll talk Gabriel Jesus as well, because I still remember before we signed him, you coming on this podcast and saying that he would be the one for you. So are you still feeling that way? We'll get into that. We'll talk Declan Rice as well. We'll even touch on the goalkeeping debate. I've said my bit on it, but I want to get Mike's take on that. We're going to talk Kai Havertz as our kind of main feature of this episode, because I think he's finally arrived as an Arsenal player. I think it's taken a bit of time. I think he's needed a sort of adaptation period to understand fully what he was being tasked with doing in this team, to understand the role, to make those connections, build those bridges with his teammates. But it feels to me like he is here now and showing everybody the reasons that Mikel Arteta was so keen to get him, that he was willing to push the boat out to around about £65 million, from what we understand. So first of all, Mike, Kai Havertz, are you having him?
Yeah, of course. I mean, how can you not? The last three, and I think I'm not sure what your take was before the last 4 games, but I'm someone that backed him. I think the quality is clear. The application, the positional stuff, we can all talk about and can be debated. But I think just purely based on quality, I'd seen enough before he joined Arsenal to know that with the right coaching, with the right plan, and with the right development, that he could, flourish. And I think that's happening now. I think there's still things that need to be ironed out. But for example, just how difficult a task it is coming into a Mikel Arteta side. I mean, cast my mind back to Gabriel Martinelli, him having a really tough time in the team early days of Arteta, and it's because Martinelli was a kind of, you know, traditional winger where he'd get his head down, try and beat a man and get a cross in. The adaptation period for him to realize how much more he had to do for the team and on the ball was clear. And I think the same is happening with Havertz. And we had Jorginho on the Athletic podcast earlier this week, actually. And he was just talking about how detailed Arteta is. And he said that, you know, for pretty much everything that happens on the pitch, Arteta has a plan for it. And he was saying, like, Io, who's the host, said, you know, there's like how much detail we talking, and he said, you know, there's literally every scenario, and that gives me a headache. And he was like, how do you sleep at night thinking of every scenario that could happen in a football match? And you know, it's that level of detail and that level of coaching that obviously takes time. And I think the thing with Havertz, Harry, from like an outside perspective, you look at him and he's got the bit of the Ozil in him in terms of he's a bit lackadaisical, doesn't seem to run as much off the ball, I think. And these are the kind of lazy criticisms that we get into with sort of more luxury players, I guess you can call them, players that don't necessarily have a defined position, like Havertz didn't have previously, but I think he's getting to know that now. So I think sometimes you've got to look a little bit deeper beyond, you know, no goals and no assists and analyze things a little bit further. But yeah, I'm really having him.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify for your benefit, what my position was at the beginning, it was back him, support him. I did have a couple of wobbles, not where I was saying, you know, get him out. Why did we sign him? Waste the money or anything like that. And the chat will back me up on that. But I did have a couple of times where I'd come away from a game and said, we kind of need to chat about where Kai Havertz fits in the picture, because it felt to me like we'd brought in this immensely talented young man, and he is a young man. He's just 24 years old. I think people overlook that. And we've tried to shoehorn him into a system that I'm not sure works for him. I remember when we got wind of the fact that Mikel Arteta was intending to use him as a midfielder. And I remember thinking, that can't be right. Like that can't be right. Surely someone's got the wrong end of the stick here, and that actually he's coming in to play as somebody that can play anywhere essentially across our front line, maybe in the Odegaard role in his absence. But I couldn't get my head around that. And at the beginning, to me, it wasn't really working. You know, he was in this limbo. He was not involved enough in the forward play because obviously he was concerned about leaving holes defensively. But you could clearly see that, you know, that's where he wanted to be, in those more advanced positions. You look at him today, and I see a player that has finally found the balance between what's required of him in an attacking sense, but also in terms of his positional responsibilities as a midfielder, because he does get up really close to Gabriel Jesus. At times now, you'll see him push up, and Jesus drop deeper so that Arsenal can go that little bit more direct and use his height as a bit of a weapon. So I think, you know, it's finally starting to click with Kai Havertz, and I'm really, really enjoying him, watching him, you know, not just sort of playing well, but scoring goals and contributing as well, because that's all people look at, unfortunately. And I think that there were signs that this was coming a few weeks ago. The level of performance started to improve. And then, you know, you were just hoping that that missing piece would come, the goals, the assists. And he's got 3 goals now in his last 3 starts. So for me, he's turned those performances into outputs as well. And I just think, you know, given his physical profile and all the rest of the things that we're going to discuss, I just think this was a really clever buy. I think we paid probably slightly over the odds, but I accept that that's going to happen when you're trying to buy from a rival.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with a lot of what you said. And like, just to be honest, there were times where I wavered as well, and I thought, how does he fit in? There was a game against Burnley at home, and before the game, I said, right, this is it. This is where he turns it around, because, you know, it's Burnley. They were around the bottom of the table at the time, as they still are now. And I said, you know, this is his time. And there was a moment in that game where he was almost through on goal. I don't know if you remember. And instead of sort of driving towards goal and having a shot, he passed it to Trossard, I think it was. And I was like, man, like, Kai, this is your time. Like, you need to take these opportunities. He'd also had a header in that game, I think, that he missed. But I think what it is, and where I can really credit him, is that Arteta didn't stick with him. He did drop him. Like, people forget that. He did say, this is not working. We need to try something else. He's played Trossard in that 8 position. He's moved Rice to number 8. He's played Jorginho as the number 6. He's tried different things. So for Havertz to sort of be the £65 million signing and react so well to being benched, I think is testament to his character. And we all knew the quality was there. He's a player who scored a goal in a Champions League final, for God's sake. Like, he is obviously a quality player, but I just think there's certain things that weren't quite happening. And I think now he's really doing what he was brought to do, which is to be that sort of dual 10 in possession with Odegaard, and, as you say, go beyond and get into the box and score goals as well. But as you say, vital contributions. Like, if he doesn't get that winner against Brentford, like, that's dropped points. And it might not seem like much, but the opener against Lens sets the pace. These are important goals. The goal yesterday, we'd gone 2-1 down, I think, was his goal. Or was it 3-3? His goal, I think it was 3-3 actually. These are important goals because we bounced straight back. 3-3. Yeah, we bounced straight back, and that's important, because if Luton had a time where they were ahead for a while, I think that game looks a bit different, because we're getting frustrated and we need 2 goals to win the game. So the fact that he bounced back straight away is brilliant. And yeah, I mean, I really like him, and I hope he can just continue to improve. And he's not going to start every game, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think he's almost like a bit of a finisher. Like, you sort of bring him on and he can go up front. He can add, some height, as you say. And I think actually that kind of height and aerial ability ties in with the David Raya signing, because David Raya's strength, or one of his strengths, is his kicking. So the fact that he's got a consistent target there to find is not, it's done by design. So yeah.
Here's one for you. So do you think that when we looked at the signing of Kai Havertz, the problem was that we were looking at it as a standalone acquisition rather than looking at the bigger picture, which was that we bought Declan Rice in, which meant that we could be a little bit more adventurous with the position of our 2/8s because of how good Declan Rice is, and therefore Kai Havertz fit the bill. Because one of the things that I kept saying at that time was, we've just lost Granit Xhaka and we've brought in a player that is completely different in terms of his profile and mentality. And that's what I couldn't get my head around. But should we have, looking back at it with hindsight, gone, well, Mikel is bringing in Declan Rice, which means that he'll be able to commit those 2/8s that little bit more further forward, even push one up as a second striker at times, because of the extra ability that we have in Declan Rice and his ability to cover ground and all the rest of it. Should we have looked at it that way? Because the more I think about this, I'm starting to think that this was a signing that was made because we had another signing coming in that was going to allow us to utilize this one, rather than it being a standalone acquisition of a player to fit in one specific role, rather than it just being a like for like Havertz for Xhaka.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't think Havertz in this team last year can do what he does, because going forward in that position, when you're pushing 5 players up, when you've got the front 3 and Odegaard and Havertz, you need someone like Declan Rice to be able to cover that ground. And he's another one who's been absolutely sensational. But yeah, I think you're right. But I think the wider point, Harry, is that Arsenal fans, after all this time and what Arteta has done, still don't trust him. And I'm not saying you need to blindly follow someone, because then we get into like cult territory, which we've spoken about before on many occasions. But I think he's got so much credit in the bank with the current hierarchy right now, with the recruitment staff, Edu, all of them guys, to say he saw something in Havertz that he wanted to add to the team. I think the tough thing for Havertz as well was replacing Xhaka, because Xhaka is a player who was much maligned over his Arsenal career, but in his last season, everyone loved him. So it was a really difficult job to come in and, you know, he's not replacing him like for like because they're very different players, but he was playing in the same position. So we have to consider that as well. But yeah, absolutely. And I think Havertz can add even more to his game, because sometimes I do watch him and I think he is a little bit sloppy with the ball. Like I've got some stats for you soon as well,
Go for it.
which I
Go
can
for
read
it.
out.
Read
Yeah,
them off. Yep.
yeah. So I've got these stats from a website called FBref, which is really good. So the ones I'm going to read out now are this season in the Premier League versus other midfielders, which is important because it's hard to categorize Havertz sometimes, but I think most of all he lines up in midfield.
That's key though, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
for the beginning of his Arsenal career, the first few weeks we were going, there's no goals, there's no assists, but actually you're talking about a midfield player here, not a striker. So you
yeah,
need to remember that, and you're right to have
yeah.
compared him to those players. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so the way it works is that they do it in terms of percentile. So, for example, Havertz's non-penalty XG is 0.27, which ranks him in the 98th percentile, meaning that only 2% of players have better stats than him in that area. So I'll just do it that way. So yeah, non-penalty XG 0.27, again, that's 98%. Non-penalty goals 0.22, 87. Assists are slightly down, 67th percentile for that. But we're talking about something that's really, really important, and something that a lot of midfielders don't do. So this is why he stands out. Touches in the attacking penalty area, so opposition's box, 99%. So there's only 1% of midfielders in the Premier League that have better than that. That's an average of 5.75 per game.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Aerials won as well, 3.26 per 90, 98%. I mean, these are really impressive things to be saying. Defensively, he's not too bad. Tackles in defensive third is way down 4%, but that's because he plays higher up. But when you get to the middle third, it's up at 84 at 1.3 per match. Tackles in the attacking third, 0.54, 84th percentile. So, these are things that I think could improve. But I think when you look at the stats, they certainly paint a picture of a guy that is doing a good job. And even if that wasn't evident beforehand, before the goals, I think you can see it now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. And thanks for that. And for doing the research, because I'm not very good at those percentile things. I struggle with them. But just kind of looking at his Premier League performances as well, because in recent times, in terms of outputs, those have certainly improved. And I'm not going to go as in depth as you have, but if I look at sort of the last, I don't know, 8 games in the Premier League, he's got 3 goals in those. Okay, one of them was the penalty that we gave him at Bournemouth. But if you're judging a midfielder and he's got 3 goals in 8 league games, that's by no means bad, is it? And this is a guy that during his time at Chelsea got 32 goals in 139 appearances, which for someone who apparently couldn't hit a barn door isn't bad. We all know that he's probably not an out-and-out centre forward. So again, you've got to put the numbers up against that. If you look at his Leverkusen stats, it was pretty much 1 goal every 3 games for them. And he played in a variety of positions for the Bundesliga side as well. So the outputs are there now to go with, the touches in the opposition box and everything. And that's what I think is converting the masses when it comes to Kai Havertz and whether or not he's a good enough fit for Arsenal. I think there are a lot of players in football that go under the radar, that bring things to a team that for some reason, I don't know if people can't see or just refuse to see. And the analysis can be really simplistic and basic at times. I mean, you take Gabriel Jesus, for example, and he's another player that I want to talk to you about because, as I mentioned at the top of the program, you were very big on the idea of signing Jesus before it actually happened. We sat down one day, we did a podcast where we kind of wrote down shopping lists, didn't we, of players that we'd like to see the team go for, and you had him down. There's been some talk recently about him maybe not scoring enough goals. And I think partly that was fueled by the fact that he came out and said, maybe it's not my speciality or whatever he did for Brazil on international duty. I feel like that got a little bit lost in translation. He's come out and clarified that since. But last night, for me, was an example of what Gabriel Jesus is, right? He's someone that is intense all the time. He's someone that thinks quickly. He's someone that can score goals, but can also be one hell of a provider as well. And it's the overall package, isn't it, that appeals to Mikel Arteta. And I feel that when he's not in the side and Eddie Nketiah plays, I think he's a good striker in his own right, but you see the difference in the cohesion of our forward line on the whole. And this is why this guy, for me, is just an unreal and outstanding player. What have you made of, A, the criticism that he's had in recent times, and what did you make of his performance last night and more recently?
I mean, I thought he was just, again, unbelievable. And the last 2 games, really, I think he's really stepped it up. He just offers us something completely different, Harry. And I was saying to someone yesterday, I think it sounds weird to say, but I think he's the best striker in the league who doesn't score. Because he can do everything. Like, he can literally do everything, but goal scoring is not his forte. And, like, rival fans will listen to that and say, I don't want a striker if they don't get 20 goals a season. I mean, the bare facts of that, Jesus will not do that. But what he offers to our team in terms of link up play, in terms of like aerial ability as well. The guy's not 6'2", but he wins so many duels in the air because he's just so strong and so determined to win them. Like the assist for Havertz was just like typical Jesus. Like, he just backs into his defender, touches it down, pops a little ball over the top for Havertz to basically tap it in, and that is what he does. I think his best quality is he makes the players around him better. And I remember earlier in the season, or when we did our preseason season preview, sorry, we spoke about how he would get the best out of Martinelli. And I think he's done that. Maybe it's not showed as much this season, but last season for sure. His link-up play is completely out of this world. And yes, someone made the point in the chat that he got 8.9 rating last night. He was man of the match according to a lot of statistical pages. But yeah, I mean, for me, Harry, I think it doesn't really bother me that he's not going to get 20 goals a season if he's making other players better and allowing other players to score. I saw a stat that his goal at 2-1 meant that 11 different players had scored Arsenal's previous 11 goals in the Premier League. So it just shows that we're sharing the goals around. And this whole thing about we need a goal scorer, I mean, of course it will be nice. Like, no one's going to say no. Like, if Erling Haaland turns up at your door, you're not going to say, no, sorry, Erling, we've got Jesus. But it's not realistic. And I think we can cope well enough without that.
And I think it's important as well not to be reliant on one man for your goals. And I think the unique position that Manchester City are in is that even without Erling Haaland, they've got so much talent that they can still score goals, etc., etc. But for most teams, if you build your entire model and game around one guy and that one guy becomes unavailable, you have a big problem. We saw it not that long ago when we were heavily reliant on Alexis Sanchez. You go back even further, we had a time where we were overly reliant on Robin van Persie. There was a time where we were overly reliant on Emmanuel Adebayor for goals. So you can get into that position. And while that player looks great and comes off, with all the stardust and all the rest of it, it isn't the way to go. I think if you can facilitate the effectiveness of a Saka, of a Martinelli, of Odegaard, of Havertz, that can actually be more powerful than having that one man who, all your hopes rest on every single week. And when he has an off day or is unavailable, you're basically up shit street. So I quite like the way we do it now and the way, we're moving forward. And Russ makes a good point in the comments. He says everyone thought that Spurs would struggle without Kane. People would argue that as an attacking force, maybe Spurs, I'm not going to say are better because Harry Kane, is a brilliant player. I can say that now that he doesn't play for that lot, but it's one of those things where, sometimes removing that one player that is the focal point all of the time can open the door for others to thrive and go on to different levels, which is always a good thing as a manager. You always want to have multiple players, don't you, that are threatening and causing people problems. We're going to take a really, really, really short pause. And when we come back, we'll talk about the celebration police. We'll talk about Declan Rice and we'll get Mike's thoughts on Arsenal's season so far. We'll also take a few of your questions before we go. So if you've got any good ones, start getting them in the chat. Put a little Q next to them and I'll favorite them and come back to them towards the end of the show. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Welcome back to the show. I'm joined by the brilliant Mike Stavrou. It's been a long time, Mike. I mean, you've been doing some amazing things. You've been on podcasts and working on podcasts that have won awards. You've been smashing it. I mean, it's only fair that you tell everyone what you've been up to and where you've been and how they can follow you and all the rest of it. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, no, thank you, Harry. Yeah, it's been a really great year. I've been at the Athletic for over a year now. I've got to do some incredible stuff. When I first joined, we did a podcast on Shakhtar Donetsk, which was hugely out of my comfort zone to cover a team that we're in a country that we're at war. But I never thought that I'd be doing stuff like that. So the fact that I've got the opportunity to do so is amazing. And yeah, as you say, like I'm gonna have to cough here when I say the name of the team that I currently cover, Spurs. But yeah, so yeah, that podcast has managed to win an award since I've been there. So it's great fun. And I do also manage to do the odd Arsenal podcast as well. Like I said, we had Jorginho in the studio the other day, which was fantastic. Yeah, if you haven't listened to that, I'd recommend any Arsenal fan to listen to it, because he really sort of opened up and spoke very honestly. A lot of players, and as you all know, Harry, are very robotic because they're so media trained and careful what they say. But Jorginho is probably at the stage of his career right now where he feels like he's 30, 31, 32, and he can he's been through it all. He's not too bothered about what he's going to say, but he's also a very, very smart guy, so he's never going to get himself in trouble or anything like that. But yeah, it was a really, really great interview. But yeah, thank you for the shout out. Appreciate it.
No, all good, mate. I did listen to the Jorginho podcast this morning and I really, really enjoyed it. So I can vouch for how good that is as well. Make sure you go over and check it out. Right, let's talk a little bit about the celebration police, who used to just be a group of people online that would moan and complain and whinge every time Arsenal would celebrate a victory or a goal. However, it seems to have extended now into the PGMOL, because Mikel Arteta was booked yesterday for, and I quote, over celebrating. I said this on the episode that I did earlier today. I looked at the referee after the goal, so in the aftermath of the goal, and where I was on the gantry at Kenilworth Road, you're literally hanging over the touchline, right? So you can't see the dugout. You need to lean forward and look down. My focus was on the goal. My focus was on the away end, the supporters, the player celebrations, all the rest of it. And I see the referee at the corner of my eye coming over with a yellow card. And I thought, classic Arteta. He must have done something. He must have crossed the line because it's Mikel Arteta. He must have, gone too far. He must have had a little run towards Rob Edwards or something like that. I don't know. And then I got home and I watched it back and I thought, well, then surely there's something that he's done off camera that I haven't seen. And I've spent all day looking and trying to figure it out. And I just can't work out what exactly Mikel Arteta is booked for. Not only that, the Luton fans inside the stadium and a lot of the people that were covering the game that were not of an Arsenal persuasion seemed to be irritated by the way that Arsenal celebrated the winning goal. Look at them. They're celebrating as if they've won the league and all the rest of it. I mean, aren't you just sick of all this crap, man? Like, you're not allowed to enjoy football anymore. Is that where we are?
Yeah, I mean, look, just going to a base level, the world is a tough place. Life is hard. Football is escapism for a lot of us. We watch it, we pour our hearts into it, and you and me, Harry, we do it for our jobs as well. So not only is it, when we go to a game or when we doing a podcast or whatever we're doing, that is our job. But then we go and watch the football and we live it all again. And we talk about it afterwards in our group chats, and we get stick from rival fans, and we have to. So it's basically a 24-hour thing for us that we live through. So the fact that when we go for a game like that, which was mad, as we discussed earlier, against a team that we, let's be honest, expected to beat quite comfortably, and when we gift them 3 goals, I think to come back and still win that game is a huge release, and that's for us fans. Like that's us watching it on the TV or in the stadium or wherever it is. Imagine like how much that is intensified for the players on the pitch, who, because we're competing against Man City, who are this gargantuan team with all this money to spend, and you basically can't slip up ever. The fact that they've overcome this and managed to get 3 points, like, of course you're going to be emotional. Of course you're going to enjoy it. So I think the fact that rival fans, whoever it is, are telling us you're over celebrating, I think that's crazy. like, just let us please have this thing. And I think maybe it's a thing with Arsenal that because we have been a banter club and we're actually good now, they're trying to look for stuff to criticize us. I mean, that's how I feel anyway.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same. I think that, you know, there were moments last season that even though we didn't win the league and even though it kind of all went a little bit to pot at the end of the campaign, and that was really, really difficult to take, I think, the way it kind of all unraveled, there are still moments that we produced as a team and we got to enjoy as fans last season that will be unforgettable. You know, the Reece Nelson moment against Bournemouth, that will go down with us Arsenal fans that were there, that lived and breathed it, that watched it on TV. Everybody will remember where they were when Reece Nelson scored that goal and how they celebrated it. You know, I go back to Andre Arshavin scoring that goal against Barcelona. The reaction that we had inside the Emirates that day, we didn't go on and win the Champions League or anything. You know, you think about the Danny Welbeck goal against Leicester City when we thought we were going to win the league and in the end we didn't. But those moments live with you as a fan, so you should embrace them. You should enjoy them. And nobody's saying at the start of December that Arsenal have won the league. In fact, the noise is coming from people that say Arsenal are the favourites. They're not coming from us. They're coming from the outside. They're coming from people that, in my opinion, still haven't learned their lesson about Manchester City and what they're capable of doing in the second half of any given season. So, you know, I'm not sitting here saying that Arsenal are going to win the league. I think we've got a chance, and I'd love to see us do it, of course. And I'd love to see us go all the way in the Champions League. But you just got to enjoy and embrace these moments. And I think it's wild that Mikel Arteta has been booked for celebrating, because when you watch the celebration, and listen, I'll take my Arsenal hat off, not literally because I badly need a haircut, but you know, you when you watch that back, I can't see a thing that he's done that has crossed the line and is worthy of a yellow card. And I think we're in this really dangerous space now of, because everybody's quite immature around football, and it's like, well, he done this, why hasn't he been? But like, for example, I've seen going around today a video of Roberto De Zerbi when he ran on the pitch at Nottingham Forest celebrating, and people saying, well, why hasn't De Zerbi been booked, and all of the rest of it. And obviously people are upset because Arteta's going to miss the Villa game now. He's going to be in the stands as a result of picking up his third booking. But I don't think any of them warrant a yellow card. Like and that's the point. I think we're trying to sanitize a game that is built on emotion. We've already done that to a degree, Mike, with VAR and the way that we delay giving or disallowing certain goals. And I can accept that because I think that has a massive impact on the outcome of games. And I want football to be fair. So I can accept conceding a little bit on that side, but I can't accept us booking people for celebrating a 97th minute winner. It's just wild.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to like, are the grounds for the booking because he left his technical area? Like, he's not being booked for celebrate. I'm just talking about like rules wise. He's not being booked for celebrating. He's being booked because he was outside of his technical area during the game, right?
I'm assuming so. I don't think there's been any clarity on that. I think Football.London put out a piece earlier where they just said over celebrating. So
I think, look, with all these things, you can have rules, but then you have to apply context. And I think with a situation where, as we said, it was an emotional game, Arteta has, put a lot of work into this game himself, just from all the gesticulating and running up and down the touchline he does. He's emotional too. Like, you have to allow him that. And the fact that it has led to a ban and he's not going to be on the touchline for Villa is just, I don't know. It makes me crazy. It really does, because we're saying basically with that, if your team score a last minute winner, you can't celebrate. That's basically what you're saying. What you meant to do a little fist pump or hug an assistant, and that's the most you can do. I mean, and the people, just going back to the players briefly. I mean, I was having a conversation with a mate of mine, and he was saying, "Oh, you're over celebrating, and you're not won anything yet." And like, firstly, does that mean you can only celebrate once you've won the league? That means we basically can't celebrate until May.
Everyone should remain silent during all goals.
And also, like, what if the players didn't celebrate? I think we'd be criticizing them more, because it's like, they'd look arrogant if they didn't celebrate. They'd just be like, "Oh yeah, it's Luton. We've only scored in the 95th minute, whatever it is, and we're not going to celebrate." So like, there's just no logic and no appreciation. And especially, someone made the point in the chat, like, we lived through some tough times of Arsenal, like watching that Wenger team dissipate, and then the sort of 10 tough years that followed, and all of the toxicity within the fan base. I mean, we don't have to go that far back, Harry, to see, you know, how toxic Arsenal fans were to each other. The fact that it's not happening now, and the sort of atmosphere and the culture around the club is so improved, is testament to us. And we don't want to get back to that stage where, you know, where we can't celebrate. And I don't know, it really does like really wind me up. And I just wish that fans would just like take off those rose tinted glasses for a second and just say, you know, if this was my team, I would celebrate, and like just have a bit of context.
Yeah, and that's the problem with a lot of the VAR debates as well. I've said this for a long time, that until we put tribalism to one side, we're not really going to inflict any change with these matters, because you're always going to get this whataboutery, and what about us, and what about them, and he did this and I did that, and it becomes a bit of a joke, doesn't it? Football's just not mature enough, unfortunately, to fix a lot of these issues. And if we don't fix them, we're going to end up in a place where I think people are going to start to lose love for the game. I really do. Like, as a 30 something year old, I love football because I've loved it growing up, and I don't think I'll ever be able to turn off from it. But I think if I were a young kid growing up now watching football, there would be elements of it that would put me off, and that would never have been the case 15, 20 years ago. So yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's a tough one. I do want to get your take, Mike, on this Raya Ramsdale thing. We haven't spoken about this all season. I think that Raya is clearly the number one now. I don't think that's debatable, at least in Mikel Arteta's head. But we saw David Raya make 2 costly errors yesterday. Thankfully, his teammates bailed him out in the end. But should Mikel Arteta now be considering making a change ahead of Saturday, or does he stick with David Raya? Because I'm quite conflicted on this. I think that people have been saying that what Arteta's done is create this environment where they're both scared to make a mistake, and that's impacted their performances. Yet now, as fans, a lot of us are saying, well, one of them made a mistake on Tuesday night, so he should be dropped now. So it's like we're calling for the thing that we're criticizing. So I'm a bit confused about all of this. Where are you on the Raya Ramsdale thing generally, and where do you think Arteta goes now this weekend? Is it continue with Raya, or is it go back to Ramsdale maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are confused, and I saw Clive from Arsenal Vision say that, you know, usually when I can see a situation, I see it very clearly, and he said I'm confused. So the fact that he's confused, and if
Clive's confused,
if Clive's confused, we're all done for. And I'm confused about the situation. I think there is an emotional element to it as well, because, you know, we've spoken on this podcast about some of the signings that we made, and we built this core of players who really, you know, put everything on the line for the shirt. And Ramsdale was one of those. I think Ramsdale was part of the culture change at the club. And we all become hugely emotionally attached to him. And I think maybe sometimes that blinds us a little bit. But what I would say is that I don't think there's a huge amount between them. I think Raya is, statistically, he's better at shot stopping. Although looking at it last night, you wouldn't have said that.
You wouldn't have thought that, would you?
His kicking is marginally better. I guess he's more composed on the ball, but judging by his first few games, you wouldn't have said that either. So I think the difference between them, yes, it might be a slight upgrade on Ramsdale, but I think it was a difficult situation because Ramsdale was still at the club, and you were always going to have that thing where one keeper makes mistakes. Your manager's talking about subbing keepers. Your manager's talking about there's no number one. It just created for me a bit of a confused dialogue. Whereas if Arteta would have come out and said Raya is number one, I think fans would maybe be able to accept that. Look, I understand why he's not done that. I completely understand that.
But you can't really, can you? Because it's kind of like saying it's like saying, well, Ramsdale, it doesn't matter what you do, mate. Like, you're not playing. So where's the motivation for him to stay engaged and stuff? And the bit that I've really struggled with in this whole debate and this whole discussion throughout the course of this season so far is why people don't understand that. why people feel that Mikel Arteta has to tell them the gospel truth. He doesn't have to tell anybody. It's his decision. He's the manager. He can do whatever the hell he likes.
Yeah. I mean, what manager do you know that turns up to a press conference and tells you all of their secrets? I mean, it just doesn't work like that. In terms of the substitute, I don't think that can happen, because I think you set a really dangerous precedent. Because if you drop Raya after that and then Ramsdale comes in and makes a mistake, what happens then? Do you switch back the next game? I mean, we're talking about fine margins, because let's not forget Ramsdale played against Brentford, and he miskicked one which was cleared off the line,
He
and
was
then
rubbish. He was rubbish.
he
Let's
threw
say
it
how
into
he
the
is. He was
ground,
rubbish.
but he got bailed out. And if Raya didn't get bailed out, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I think it's fine margins, but when you make mistakes, it happens. But I think we just got to look at it as a whole. And you would say that over the last 5-6 games, Raya has been fine. So we got to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think yesterday, I mean, he generally has been good coming for crosses. There's been a few that he's been sort of caught under, but I think maybe that's an instruction to be more aggressive to catch crosses at the near post. But overall, I mean, the last 5-6 games, I don't think he's been bad. So I think we got to calm down a little bit. If we're still in a situation in 5-6 games, Harry, where he's made consistent mistakes, then maybe you ask the question again. But for now, you have to stick with him.
Well, I think that he probably should stick with him, but I also don't think there's any chance that Mikel Arteta is going to change it on Saturday.
Yeah.
So it feels like a bit of a moot point, but it is a debate that's propelled itself back to the top of everybody's agendas because of what we saw last night. Kenny has been very critical of me in the comments over the last couple of shows with regards to my takes and views on this. He says, Harry, you are framing the question in a bizarre way. It wasn't a mistake. It was a series of mistakes. I don't know that I'd call two a series. Like I feel like you're stretching it by saying it's a series. I think he gets caught underneath the cross and he gets his positioning wrong. We analysed it on the show that we did earlier today with regards to what I think exactly specifically David Raya got wrong there. And then he lets one go under his body because I think in the split second he's got to make the decision as to whether or not he should be clearing with his foot or diving. He picks the wrong option, essentially. I agree with Mike. For now, and I've been thinking about this throughout the course of the day, I think you stick with David Raya because you can't sit there and say, as I've already said, that this is all on Arteta for creating this environment where everybody's afraid to make a mistake and then drop people when they make a single mistake.
Yeah, I
Raya's
mean, yeah.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, like, Arteta clearly thinks Raya is the better keeper, and it's just unfortunate for Ramsdale that we didn't sell him. Because I mean, I don't know what goes on, but behind the scenes at Arsenal, but I don't think, in my personal opinion, that he wanted this situation. I don't think he would, because of what we're talking about right now. Like, this is not helpful, and for me, I'm just a bit sick of it. Like, we can't constantly be after every game saying, "Oh, Raya's made a mistake, he needs to be dropped." Oh, Ramsdale's made a mistake, this guy should never play for Arsenal again. Do you know what I mean? So I think the perfect scenario is just to say to Ramsdale, look, you want games before the Euros, you can leave on loan or permanent transfer, whatever it is. And as sad as it is, and as I said, emotion is involved in it because we all love Ramsdale, I think that's just what needs to happen.
There's a comment from Hacker there who says Raya is a vanity project for Arteta. Getting rid of Raya will probably affect Arteta, in my opinion. I mean, I like, when are we going to get to the point where we just look at Mikel Arteta and say, overall, he's done a really good job of getting Arsenal back into a place where they're competing for a Premier League title, to the point where a lot of us are expecting Arsenal to go on and win the Premier League, which was unthinkable 5 years ago, and just trust him that there's obviously something that he sees. I mean, I'll ask you this question, Mike, because I've already answered it over the last few weeks, but do you think that David Raya generally, although he's made a couple of mistakes and had a few moments, do you think that generally he brings more calm to the backline?
I mean, it's hard to say because it's been a small sample size. But I think in the first few games he really struggled. But I think a lot of keepers would struggle coming into a new team, and especially with the situation that's gone on with Ramsdale being there as well. But in the games following, bar last night, I think he has generally been good on the ball, and he's been calm. we compare that to a bigger sample size with Ramsdale. I think he had the ability to chuck one into the back of his own net by, loose touches. He's kicking not quite being right, making the wrong decision, passing. And I remember Ramsdale making a lot of passes through two defenders that sometimes didn't come off. And that's even before we get to the saving situation, where even though Ramsdale did make some incredible saves, he also let a lot of soft goals in. I remember even against Diogo Jota, I think he let in about 3 or 4 across the span of 2-3 games. So I think he's an upgrade. It might be minimal, but I think in terms of how we want to play, it's a move in the right direction. And I just think this whole situation has been exacerbated by Ramsdale still being there, basically. And I think if he wasn't there, this wouldn't be a conversation at all.
Yeah, totally agree. I think for me, we're not helping the situation either as fans, as podcasters, by kind of constantly bringing it into the conversation and bringing it under the spotlight. But it is something that fans are talking about, and I feel like we do need to talk about it for that reason. But
Yeah,
it's a tough one. It's a tough one because I agree with what you said earlier, where you say that there's not much between them. I think there's a Rizzler paper difference between the two of them. I think one is better at certain things, one is better at other things. And I think when you look at the overall picture, there is very little difference between the two of them. Therefore, you can't sit there and say that Mikel Arteta is 100% wrong, and you can't say he's 100% right. And I think because of the credit he's got in the bank, you have to kind of sit back and go, right, I just have to trust that there is something. Think about the hysteria that was around Kai Havertz 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and look at where we are now. Think about the hysteria there was when Odegaard came in and people were saying, no, don't sign him on a permanent deal. Go and get Emi Buendia. Do you remember that one? Go and get Emi Buendia. He'll be the answer. Remember when Gabriel came in and people said that he was too rash and he was an accident waiting to happen? He's turned out to be one of the best centre-backs in the Premier League, and that means in the world. There is a lot of examples of things where we've looked at them as fans and gone, I can't get my head around that. I can't work it out. And in time, we've been proven wrong. And that's why Mikel Arteta is the manager of Arsenal Football Club, and we're sitting here because we don't have that insight in terms of being with them every single day, but we also don't have that knowledge and understanding of the game. We just don't. And I'm happy to put my hands up and say that. And I don't know why more fans aren't happy to put their hands up and say that. But anyway, let's take a couple of your questions. Yard Gooner says, Harry, what do you know about Rizzler paper? I was young once, my friend. Let's get some of your questions through. We'll pick out a couple before we go. But just before we do that, give you a chance to fill up the chat box. Mike, Declan Rice. Oh, I mean, I'm running out of superlatives for this guy. And he's not even been at the club a long time yet. I can think already of a handful of examples of match-changing, match-winning performances and obviously big moments.
I mean, Harry, I've this will be shocking news to you, but I've not always been right about everything. Even though I did call Gabriel Jesus when Declan Rice was in the early days at West Ham and he started out as a centre back. I remember did he score his first West Ham goal against us? Maybe he scored one of his first senior goals was against us when he was playing at centre back, and then when he moved into midfield, I was a bit. I liked his industry. I thought he worked really hard, but his quality on the ball, I was never really sure of. And man, have I been proved wrong? Like, the guy is an absolute machine off the ball. As you said, like he makes up for having 5 attackers in the team because he does the job of 2 players. He's basically a double pivot in one because he can cover so much ground. His anticipation. The way he never really dives in without calls. Like, every time he dives in, he gets the ball. The guy off the ball is a monster, but on the ball, his passing range is amazing. I mean, like, how many things can you say about him? His passing is incredible. He's got a good shooting technique. His best quality, I think, which we haven't seen loads of because we've been playing against so many low blocks, is driving with the ball, and it's such a underrated quality, I think, and something that's so important that when you're playing teams and you need to break the lines, he does that not with passing but with his driving play as well. Yeah, he's just and also he's just so Arsenal. And like coming from West Ham, I would have thought, I'm not really sure, how's he gonna fit in, but he's
You
just
thought he
so
was too
Arsenal.
West Ham for us,
I
didn't
thought he
you?
was too West Ham, but he's so Arsenal and also like it is kind of funny seeing a few tweets of West Ham fans last night saying, "Oh, Arsenal better win the league now, or Declan Rice going there was a waste." It's like, okay, they're they're,
They're
they're
so
so they're
rattled.
so
They're so
saucy, aren't
rattled.
they?
Yeah.
They're so salty, which is enjoyable as well. I mean, if fans can tell us we can't celebrate, then we can have a laugh at them being incredibly salty. But yeah, man, what a player.
What a player indeed. Let's take a few questions then, just for the last 3 or 4 minutes of the show. We'll rattle through some of these. Just quickly, Moss says, Harry, is Tomiyasu out for a while now, or is it just a little injury? For those that didn't catch it, Mikel Arteta said in his press conference last night that a calf problem has shown up on the scan that he had, and his words were, he's probably going to be out for a while. So that's not good news at all. Not good news at all. He was, I think, playing the best football of his Arsenal career to date over the last few weeks. So it's a really big blow for us. And with Timber still out, we are a bit short in the defense. And with Timber, we couldn't see it coming. It was a brand new signing, really, really unfortunate. With Tomiyasu, though, there have been a series of muscular injuries. And I think that although I love the player, we're probably going to have to come up with a contingency plan in the not too distant future in order to protect ourselves against losing him, because we can't be this thin defensively. Temi Ola says, thoughts on our loan players, especially Charlie Patino. We won't sit and go through all the loan players because obviously we're conscious of time, but Charlie Patino, Mike, does he have a future at Arsenal? Because as good as he's done at Swansea, I'm not sure that I can see it just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I don't watch Swansea week in, week out. There's been too much football, but whenever I've seen highlight reels, he looks good. But I saw someone say on Twitter that with the Swansea manager getting sacked, he wasn't particularly playing him. So maybe there's a chance with a new manager coming in, he might see the quality that he has and he gets a bit more game time. But I mean, because it looked like at some point earlier this year, whether it was late last year, that he was going to go, wasn't it? I think it looked like he was on the way out. So the fact that he's stuck around is promising. But I just think the current iteration of Arsenal that we are right now, Harry, we don't have Europa League football. We don't really have anywhere to play these guys, unfortunately. So Charlie Patino, if he comes back next season, having been in the Championship, a division below, I mean, he's gonna have to be unbelievable to even get in an FA Cup or League Cup team. So, I mean, right now it looks tough, although we'd obviously love it to happen.
Creambone says, Harry, Mike, what do you think last night's result will do to the mentality of the other title challengers? Now, we're recording this, 2 hours before Liverpool and Manchester City are both in action. But I guess if we slightly reframe the question to protect it against time, I mean, do you think that what those teams saw us do and how sort of deep we were able to dig in the end will have any sort of impact on them watching on?
I wouldn't say in this sort of game, because I think it's a game that we should have won, but for individual errors. I mean, as I said earlier, Luton were gave a good account of themselves given the talent that they have, but should be beating Luton away, considering that, as I said, they've got 9 points from 14 games. But I think the important thing in terms of our rivals is, and this is something I tweeted, I said, just looking at the sort of 3 games, we had Brentford, Wolves, Luton, and City had Liverpool, Spurs, Villa, and now City have dropped points in 2 of those, and we've won all 3. So we're making up ground. And as we've seen,
But we should be, though, shouldn't we, during this
yeah,
period, given the fixtures?
yeah, absolutely. And I think more for us, like, we need to build up as big an advantage as we can, because my one thing, and I know we've not got to discuss my sort of thoughts on the season, but I will say, like, I've been impressed with us this season. I think where everyone said we've got more control, we're defensively more solid, and maybe not as good going forward, but we're looking like much better title challengers because of we're able to be calm and keep going in games and still win games. But the one thing that worries me, Harry, is that when we get to the latter stage of the season, can we see it through? Do we have that mentality? Can we not crumble in the way that we have done in the recent past? And that's my one big thing. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to see about that. But teams are scared of us. I think that's fair to say now that the banter era has left us, and it's left us for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. We'll take one more just really, really quickly. In fact, I'll take this one. TBG's one was more of a, he says, who does Kai Havertz most remind you of? For me, it's Thomas Muller. I would have said Thomas Muller as well. So that's why I'm not going to go into that one in too much detail, because I think you're spot on in terms of his language style, the areas that he occupies and all the rest of it. Cesar says, last night was really physical. We struggled last season with the physical aspect. Do you think we lose yesterday's match with last season's squad? So if you think about the differences, you're talking Kai Havertz, you're talking Declan Rice. So the question is, do you think that those two players were a part of why we were able to withstand a physical onslaught from Luton Town and in the end come out victorious with all 3 points?
It's tough to say, isn't it? It's tough to say because we would have had a different keeper in goal as well. So does Ramsdale make those mistakes? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, look, Rice is the difference, clearly, isn't it? And I mean, we are kind of building a Land of the Giants team, aren't we?
Yeah, even our fullbacks are giants.
Yeah, our fullback's a giant. And to be fair, that was I know we've got to wrap up, but I think that was the one thing that I was a little bit unsure of last night, that Jakub Kiwior. I mean, I wasn't totally convinced, and I thought we were so much better when Zinchenko came on. So I think that's maybe the one where we're like, I think Arteta was looking at that and, smartly saying we need to be more physical, but we lost a lot of control without Zinchenko on the pitch.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that the timing of Zinchenko's introduction was right, because the game was in a state where we needed to go on and win it. And you felt like Luton were going to sink deeper and deeper at that point. And therefore, you want that player, don't you, that's got that little bit more guile and creativity. But I do think that had Tomiyasu been fit, he'd have played at left back and we wouldn't have been, I don't want to say as bad, because I don't think we were bad, but I think that had Tomiyasu played at left back, nobody really would have asked any questions of that in the way that they ask questions of Kiwior playing there. So I think, again, that's a consequence of being without the Japanese international. But anyway, we are going to leave it there. We've been going for over the hour. Michael, I'm going to call you. I bet the only person that calls you Michael is your mother. Michael, thank you very, very much for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. Let people know how they can follow you, and also let people know when you're next going to be back on so that you can commit to it and we can make sure that it happens.
I would love to do it every week, because I think there has been a massive gap in my sort of life where I can't chat shit to you and other people about Arsenal. Like it's a real like form of therapy, I think. Like, because when you have all those thoughts kind of built up and these frustrations, and like, thank you for letting me rant about the celebration police thing, because otherwise that would have made me even
You'd
more
have been
angry.
doing it at work to a bunch of Tottenham
doing
fans,
it at work.
it would have fallen on deaf ears.
Exactly. So I'm on Twitter at Mike_Stavrou. I tweet about Arsenal most of the time, but thanks for having me back, mate. And very soon, hopefully, I'll be back.
No, great to have you, man. Great to have you. We put a poll out at the top of the show. Are you now convinced Kai Havertz was a worthwhile signing? And 76% of you have said yes. Now, that poll, I'm sure, 4 weeks ago might have looked very, very different. So that's a testament to the German and how he's been able to kind of turn around the public opinion of him. And long may it continue. And hopefully he can maintain these performance levels. We've only got 117 likes on the board, which, when you consider how many of you have been watching throughout, is just not good enough. So please do leave a like on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. You've been listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, take care.